I'm going to show you how to use Lightroom to prepare images for Starry Landscape Stacker. Here I have a collection of 25 images that I collected on a recent test shoot. I have 13 images that are light frames, so that's your regular exposures with stars and the trees in the foreground. And I have another 12 images which are dark. They're dark frames, and they are taken at about the same time with the same camera settings, but with the lens cap on the camera. And these dark frames are used by Starry Landscape Stacker to reduce noise. It is important that all these frames be processed identically during raw conversion. So let's go to one of our light frames here and make some adjustments to it. The first thing I'm going to do is work on the white balance. I always leave my camera set on auto, but if you try and synchronize these adjustments across all the images, what'll get copied is the auto, not these specific values. So I change it to custom, and now these specific values will get copied to all of the other images when I synchronize them. Next, I'm going to work on the exposure. I'm going to bring the exposure up because I tend to underexpose a little bit intentionally, and that's to take advantage of ISO and variance and try and get more color and detail in the bright stars. The other thing I'm going to do is bring the contrast all the way down, and that's because these images are very high contrast. I want to try and bring as much information as I can into the useful range of the histogram here. Now, bringing the contrast all the way down wasn't enough, so I'm going to bring the blacks up a little bit. That looks pretty good. Let's look again at the exposure. That looks good. Okay, so I'm done here with my basic adjustments. Make sure that you have your white balance not set to auto. Custom works fine, and then these numbers will get copied everywhere. Exposure as necessary. Typically the contrast, you're going to bring that all the way down, and you might have to bring the blacks up a little bit. Now there's one other thing I do, and that's in the lens corrections. I remove the chromatic aberration, but I don't enable profile corrections because I find that they don't always work well. What I'm going to do though is go to manual here and go down to lens vignetting and add some vignetting correction, and somewhere around there should be good. Okay, so that's done. So I've got this image adjusted the way I want it. Now I want to synchronize that across all my images here. So this is the light frames. We'll synchronize those. White balance, the basic tone stuff. We saw that. The lens corrections, chromatic aberration, and vignetting. That's good. We'll synchronize those. We'll come back now. Select our dark frames. Synchronize those. Okay. Now we can come back here and look at our images and see if there's anything that we have to do that's specific to an image, like painting out saw another photographer walking through the foreground with a flashlight, for example. That is something we might have to paint out, or lights on a building in the distance. We might want to paint that out as well. In this case, there's none of that. I'm looking pretty much up at the trees here, and there's nothing in the trees I have to worry about. If you have airplane tracks in the sky, don't worry about those. A Starry Landscape Stacker will completely eliminate those. Okay, so we've got all of our images adjusted the way we need them. So let's just select them all, and we're going to export them. I know you can't see this, but you will in a moment see what matters. Here we go. I have this export preset that I've defined called SLS for Starry Landscape Stacker, and the way I work is I always put all my files in one place, this directory called for SLS. I don't do anything to the file naming. What matters here is file settings, TIFF, compression, none. Your other choice is zip. As far as I can tell, zip is as likely to make the files bigger as to do anything else. I use the Pro Photo RGB color space. That works fine. For bit depth, you have two choices, 8 bits and 16 bits. You do not want to use 8-bit. Do use 16-bit. 8 bits just doesn't give you enough detail. We can scroll down here a bit. I include all metadata because Starry Landscape Stacker will copy the metadata from the input files to the output file it generates, and that can be very useful in further post-processing of your images. We can remove the location and person information, but I have those set to be removed. And that looks fine, so we'll export And of course, I've done this before. We'll overwrite the existing files. And now we sit back and wait for Lightroom to do its thing.